Hey everyone, this is Rocky Roggio from 1946, the movie, and you are watching John the Ninja.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? It's John the Ninja live in the dojo, aka the Dojang, aka the John the Ninja Studios. You know the spiel, and you know this, man. And it's been a long time since I've done something like this in preparation for an interview. What would that be? Well, as you guys know, I went to school for biblical studies. This is the Bible I used almost all the time. But for this interview, I had to dive deeper into this Bible and that Bible and so many other Bibles and books that I never really thought I would ever touch again since college. But think about this statement. Why would God want me to alter who he created me to be? God is perfectly fine as the person I am. Well, that's definitely a quandary when some people try and challenge you as a person. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me get to the point. Every now and again, you realize how small of a world it really can be. Just certain topics hit close to home. Today, we tackle a very sensitive subject that's close to my heart and many others. The topic is homosexuality in the church. Now, if you know your history, homosexuality as well as other topics have been, I don't want to say the wrong word, but we'll definitely say there's been a lot of wrongdoing when it comes to those certain facts. A lot of scrutiny, a lot of pain caused by the church and people misusing the Bible instead of using it correctly. Or worse, knowing the truth and going the other way. Shane Claiborne is a very prominent Christian from my alma mater, Eastern University, and he said in a study out of the 50 states, when non-Christians were asked what they thought of the word Christian, the three things that came up were hypocrisy, judgmental, and anti-gay. The person I speak with today has been through the ringer of this, being not only outcast from her family because of who she is, but her commitment to staying the way God made her and keeping her love for God. The person I'm speaking with is Sharon Rocky Roggio. Rocky is a New Jersey native who has become a very prominent Hollywood producer, designer, independent filmmaker, and the list goes on. So she has a bachelor's in communication in which she used to work on high budget physical productions on award-winning shows, films such as House of Cards, Parks and Recreation, Red Dawn, etc., having worked with A-list stars like Sigourney Weaver, Jennifer Connelly, Drew Barrymore, Chris Hemsworth, Amy Wimmer, Amy Poehler, and the list goes on. She's also produced and production designed the film Gook that not only won the Sundance Award for Audience, is now on Netflix. So the reason we are speaking with her today is because there's more to the story. She's now on a very important journey promoting her newest film, 1946, the movie. Being part of the LGBT community, Rocky is one of the tens of thousands of Christians who have had to deal with emotional and physical turmoil of the idea of homosexuality being a sin. But she and her colleagues have discovered a possible mistranslation in the RSV text that may have caused more than just a little pain and concern for our community. So Rocky has vowed, and I quote, to make this film be a tool for love and justice within our families, our churches, and our society. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you Rocky Roggio. Mademoiselle, how are you?
Hey, how are you? What's up, Ninja?
I'm doing good. What's it been, like a month or two since I saw you?
Man, I ran into you on a live stream on the TikTok, which we're live right now, at a gas station in South Jersey. And you're like, are you talking to your audience? And I was like, hey guys, let me see how this guy handles it. And I handed you a business card and it says, is homosexual supposed to be in the Bible? And then instantly, boom, we were on. So it was cool. I took a chance and here we are.
You know what's also funny? I literally pulled back. I used to work there all the time. And I haven't, it's been like once a week, every 2 weeks, etc. So that was a very chance meeting. I'm not someone that likes to say every coincidence is God, but I am
Right.
in tune when God wants to get something out there. Sometimes it's a little bit more than coincidence. So, Mina, first things first, I did want to ask you what in the world you were doing in Jersey when I first met you, and then I dug a little deeper. These are your roots, Mina. So what are you doing now? Are you still living in Jersey and then you're commuting back to LA, or what's the game plan with that?
Yeah, I'm not really sure where I'm going to go after the movie. I'm here on the East Coast for a couple different reasons, primarily motivated with COVID, circumstances and money related incidences. So I made a choice to come home, but that also then drove us to make a decision to do post-production for the movie out of New York City, which makes a lot of sense. We have a co-executive producer in New York. We're working with a major company in New York. Our fiscal sponsor, Women Make Movies, so we're a 501c3, is out of New York. And then my parents, where we met, live 5 minutes from where we met at that gas station. So I'm now closer to my family. They're involved in the movie. Obviously, this is a very personal piece, and it's a very emotional and sensitive piece in our culture. And my parents are very much involved. So I'm here facing all of those past demons to come and bring this project to share it with everyone. That's what I'm doing on the East Coast.
It is quite a story you got. And I was lost because I was like, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. And it turns out your dad used to preach and do chapels at my school, CCS, Cumberland Christian, when I was younger. And I've seen him in passing. I've seen your brother-in-law, Sam, in passing.
Yeah.
Dude, he was my PE teacher. So with that said, you having grown up in the same environment I have, I'm a little calloused. You know, I like to pick at Christians, play devil's advocate, even though I am one. I'm curious, what was your upbringing like? Because your dad's it's weird. He's one of the guys that talks the talk, but he does walk the walk.
Yeah, for sure.
And you guys had a lot of headbutting on this subject. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing in Jersey.
Yeah, it's interesting that you went to the Cumberland Christian School, because I always was surprised that my father never sent us there.
Lucky you.
And this is also my first interview with someone who knows my dad and knows my brother-in-law. And I'm very glad to hear you say the reputation that you just put together of my father. He walks the walk and he walks the talk. You know, my dad is a very benevolent man. He's a good man. He believes everything that he's doing, and he says he lives by his standard of what he believes the word is and his interpretation of the word. And he's a very honorable man. But with that being said, he's very dogmatic, and, you know, there's a lot of doctrine that is for me, I never really resonated with. So, okay, I grew up in South Jersey, as you know, in Millville, New Jersey. That's where my dad's church is. New Jersey's a pretty liberal state, but of course I didn't know all of this growing up. All I knew was I'm the preacher's kid. I went to a secular school. I hear in the school that, you know, Christians are the weirdos, you know, we're the ones that, you know, and I would be made fun of for that kind of stuff. But what I was hearing in the church was not really what I was getting from the gospel message in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so there was a conflict for me early on. And the things that I would see, like, so my dad, even though he walks the walk, he still believes that women need to remain silent in the church. They can lead the nursery, but they can't read from the Bible on the stage, you know? And so seeing that inequality, and as a child, not really being able to articulate it or understand it, but knowing that there was something fundamentally wrong about it. And so I kind of grew up watching, observing, and challenging, which made me, of course, the problem child. And I was also a pretty hyper kid. I'm very, you know, I've got a lot of energy, and I played sports, and, you know, I guess I was a bit of a tomboy, but I'm still pretty feminine, but I was a tomboy. Mm-hmm. But later, when I realized I was same-sex attracted, and I started to just come into myself, my father read my diary, and then the world kind of clashed. Boom. You know, he invaded my privacy because he legitimately felt that my eternal soul was in danger. And so he took it upon himself, because he was literally trying to save me. And so I've forgiven him for that. As you can imagine, that's quite traumatic. So that was a little bit more of a longer answer than you probably wanted for. Yeah.
So with that said, was that before college? And most importantly, I have family members that have gone not through the same thing as far as that invasion of privacy, but the challenging of their sexuality. I think my favorite cousin, she's a lesbian. She wanted me to ask you how you dealt with that response. You know, it's not Adam and Steve and the typical, you hear it all the time because we're within the church, so we know the responses already. But she is having a tough time because her parents, out of everybody, have been way more accepting of it, of her coming out and, you know, her girlfriend, but it still bothers her that he still brings it up. So I was curious, like, what's your advice to her when her dad brings it up ever so gently, not aggressively, but still like, hey, this is bothersome. And when that happened, I know your dad, I think it was a 20-page paper or a 10-page paper. I'm sorry.
It was 10 pages.
10 pages. What was that whole situation like? Did he just walk up to you and he's like, honey, I want you to read this, and then walked away? He's like, hey, did you actually yell and scream? Was there a big fight? Could you go a little deeper into that detail, if you would?
Sure. So it was definitely between high school and college. I was 18, so I was able to make a decision to leave home. There was a big blow up. There was a big fight. And I remember being at the bottom of the stairs and my dad, constantly just talking about homosexuals. And I looked up at the top of the stairs and I'm like, how about lesbian, Dad? You like that term, lesbian? You know what I mean? It's like, I am who I am. So I don't really remember when he gave me the letter. I just remember, and I have the letter, and there was one paragraph of maybe some sort of an emotional connection, trying to connect with me, and then the rest was all Bible verses. 10 pages of, I'm not even kidding. And it started with Proverbs and about how, I wasn't disciplined enough. And so he puts the blame on himself, and he puts the blame on my mother, and he puts the blame on me. And it's just a nightmare, all the clobber passages. And so I immediately left home and tried to do it on my own. And so there was a long period of me figuring it out. First, I know who I am, so I'm not going to go and live under his roof and abide by those rules. That I was 18, so I left. And then through those struggles, we've both been navigating this path together as best we can. I've asked him to stop sending me propaganda. I've gone to his conventions. I've gone to ex-gay conventions. I've done the stuff he asked me to do. So he would stop sending me pamphlets on the slippery slope of gay marriage and all of this other evangelical propaganda. And every single time I would do something, he would get more aggressive with his pursuing because he saw hope that I could actually be going somewhere. And okay, now going to the second part of that question, which is your cousin who's now dealing with a similar thing with her father, although her father's a little bit more accepting, but still brings up these things. It's so ingrained in their minds. It's like a hot iron, isn't that verse in Timothy? It's just so ingrained in people that it's so hard to step away from that idea. And so of course he's going to throw those little digs, right? The love the sinner, hate the sin, or they still feel in the back of their minds that it's a sin. Adam and Eve and the Adam and Steve stuff. My advice is just like someone like my father, and we'll show in the film where these ideas were first implanted in our culture, that I believe that good people like our parents are victims of bad theology, just like we are. And so the split is where someone like my father, who's never going to change his mind, I don't feel, and is always going to, he can't, what he says, compromise his view of scripture for even me, who he sees as a real example in front of him, but he's never going to do that. So what we need to do is softly, as we're now knowing more and we learn more and we're exposing these things through the film. I don't know. I have empathy for someone who stays stuck in those situations, but I do feel strongly enough that the time is now, the evidence is there. We know more, and we know more about gay people, science, psychology, that there's enough of the movable middle that will shift our culture back more toward love and understanding. And it sounds like someone like your cousin's father might actually be more in that movable middle, because they even started from a different foundation than someone like my dad, who's so firmly planted in it. And when I say this is evangelical propaganda, so we'll show in the film, like through the translation notes and the history, at first we thought going into the research, the researchers thought that it was malice. And they found out through their research that it wasn't malice until the 80s, until gay liberation, until the women's movement, until the civil rights movement. And when the church became politicized in the 80s, that's when we see lexicons changing, the ESV being the most propaganded by propaganda. Well, I can't even say that word.
Propaganda.
Of homosexuality in the Bible, and then the footnotes, changing the footnotes to actually say consensual acts between males or that is not what the original says, not even close.
And we will definitely hit that. I just wanted to really ingrain this as a Christian myself. I grew up very fortunate. My mom's Christian, my dad's atheist, but I still had the ability to experience the worldly view. Because being a TCS, I call them sheltered Christians. You know, the Bible's the Bible, doing this is wrong, this is sin, pop culture crap is sin. And I'm over here screaming Highway to Hell, and Hell's Bells was the first song I learned to play on guitar. And if I didn't learn to play those songs, I wouldn't have been able to play in chapel the bass for that one concert. So there was a turmoil of finding what's okay, what's not okay, and then being okay with myself. I'm a very musical person, so that's how I relate to that journey of that, oh, I'm a sinner, I need to deal with it. But you're on a grander stage, a lot more inner conflict. I remember Rob Halford of Judas Priest in his book said when he was growing up, he started to notice he was gay. It wasn't like something happened and then he, became gay. It was just he noticed he fancied guys more. And his struggle throughout his whole career, whether or not it was like, oh, okay, I'm gay, but I don't want to be gay, versus, hey, I'm gay, but I can't get my sexual frustration out, etc. It came a long time since, to the point where he became comfortable with himself. And it seems like you figured it out at a very early age. So what was your struggle with not family, not the friends, but you and God? And when did you say, okay, God, I'm just going to roll with this. This is who I am?
I never had a problem ever. So, and that's actually one of the neat things of the story of Reverend David, who's the man who wrote the letter in 1959. His story is fantastic. And his transformation through having that experience with God, never questioning who he was and never pretending to be anything other than in front of God. That's the key. Like, God knows who we are. We're not hiding anything, And so I've always had that confidence. And maybe it's dumb luck confidence. I don't know. But it still, though, took a long time for me, obviously when you are estranged from your family and you don't fit in with what society is telling you is okay, and now you got to figure out all of this other stuff, that then leads to depression, the typical drug and alcohol abuse, just over consumption because you try to numb things. And so that's why a lot of people fall into those things in our community. It's not because there's an innate thing in us that then we are destructive because we're innately homosexual. And so now with that, and we hear theologians say that all the time, and it's so ridiculous. It's like, first of all, you're just saying that off of your emotions. That's not based off science, and it's definitely not based off of experience, and they're definitely not listening to us. So those characteristics go hand in hand because we're driven to them. It's almost like we hear what gay people are in the society, and then when we're thrown out into the society and we don't fit into the society, we become everything they told us that we are. So that's the only struggle, was really then just trying to navigate life in a society where we don't belong or fit in.
I want to point out a very important thing. I don't care what anybody's perspective is, but this is a big deal I've been dealing with in the church. When I went to Eastern University, it's a school that gets a lot of crap because it's so liberal. And it was God's blessing I went there. It's perfect storm for everything to culminate to where I am now. But I did not want to go. But the best thing I learned there was challenge everything. Like EA Sports for all you kids my age. Even if you know the answer, even if it's black and white, even if there's no way it could possibly be misinterpreted, you have to challenge the other ideas. Just not only for an apology, it's like, well, what if this? But if you don't challenge it, you don't build the strength for it. A lot of kids lost their faith at Eastern because they had a concept that was taught and it broke their faith. And I'm like, bro, what was the problem? Well, how can I love a God that, says he loves me and then kills everyone in the Old Testament? I'm like, bro, my dad was like, I made you, I'll kill you. Like, that's, I know he's got a point to it, but the idea of like, okay, listen, that's, out of everything else in theology, that's not really a make or break, especially with Jesus.
Right.
So for the viewers, I want you to, at least, if you ever get in an argument, discussion, listen to the other side. You don't have to agree, But the problem is people are so passionate about this, they really got to get it out and they don't want to listen to each other. So moving on, we'll go right back to the movie. But I am curious, you went to school for a bachelor's in communication. Where'd you go? And how did you get your start in Hollywood?
Yeah.
On all these projects.
Well, I actually went to Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey. Yeah. So I'm a Rowan alumni. And that's where I got my communications degree with a focus in radio, television, and film. I always wanted to work on major motion pictures, specifically scripted content. And I ended up getting an internship in Philadelphia at a company called Banyan Productions while I was still in college. And Banyan, their claim to fame is Trading Spaces, A Wedding Story, A Baby Story, all of those type reality shows. Epicurious was one, which is a food show, which I really loved. And so I got my start there. And then from there, I met a woman who's actually one of our producers and a writer on 1946. Her name is Jenna Serbu. And we started a company called Sweetbread Studios in Philadelphia doing experimental commercial. We did commercial work and then we did experimental film. And from there, I went, I just grew. I started line producing for a company called Radish Creative Group in Detroit. And when I was in Detroit, that's when I was living in Detroit when the largest tax incentive for film in the world was passed in Michigan. It was like a 42% cash rebate for producers to come in and film in Michigan. And so there was an influx of industry while I was already line producing for this company in Detroit. And so I was one of the first people hired on the first film that came in. And from there, I mean, my film career just blossomed. I worked with major stars on major shows. I climbed the ladder so fast. I've been in 3 local unions, one of them a New York union, which is really hard to get into, a New York or LA union. And so I had hit that milestone because getting into the film industry is very difficult. You either need to know somebody or have money or work your butt off and get a little bit lucky, right? Get a little bit lucky. And so, I had hit my goal. I hit my dream. And then I was living in Los Angeles and working on a producing career, still not going back to church, had no interest in going back to church, no interest in, my relationship with God is different than an establishment. Mm-hmm. The last thing I want to do is go and hang out in an institution that I feel is actually causing more damage in our society than good. And we definitely see that. We definitely see that with the way that religion and politics are merged today and Christian nationalism and how dangerous territory that we're on right now. So I hadn't been in church for 20 years. I was living in Los Angeles, working on a producing career, still doing the art department work that I primarily do. And I met a girl who told me she was a Christian and she wanted us to go to church. And I was like, okay. So I went to church, and while I was in this space in Los Angeles, that's when I, as an adult, had felt that welcome but not equal, mm-hmm. and the same rejection and the same experience, but now in a setting that is wanting to welcome everyone, and in my opinion, is lying to the LGBTQ community because they make it very ambiguous on whether or not they're affirming or not, and they make you feel like it's affirming.
So that's a question I did have. You stated your dad's a non-affirming Christian, or maybe not you. I'm sorry, I might have been placating into that a little too much.
Definitely not affirming.
What's the difference between an affirming Christian and a non-affirming Christian?
Sure. So a non-affirming Christian would say that homosexuality is a sin. You need to, it's a sin like any other sin. You need to repent from it and turn away from it. And, even if it's something that you're born with, tough luck. We're all born with something. You need to put that sin aside. That's the sin you were born with. And some people are that harsh about it and other people are a little bit more in the middle. And an affirming Christian would affirm your gender identity and your sexual orientation as a full member of the church, as a full participant and equal participant in the church. You could be a leader, you could be a worship team on the worship team, you could serve in the nursery and be an equal participant within the church. So non-affirming, so the difference between some place like the church I was going to in Los Angeles versus my dad's church, at least my dad's church tells you where they stand. Okay. Going in. Where the other church, you don't know. And people will spend years in these churches and then all of a sudden they'd be like, hey, I want to get married to my partner. And the pastor's like, oh yeah, I can't do that. and then they're heartbroken. And I've heard these stories and seen these stories. And so when I was in that church feeling lied to, I'm like, this is still, they're not affirming. I had to actually get the bylaws, which were not published. And when I finally did get a copy of them, in the body of the email from the lead pastor, it said, do not forward this to anybody outside of leadership. They knew exactly what they were doing. And this is happening everywhere. And so that kind of set me off, and that set me on this journey to actually learn about affirming spaces, because I was so far removed from the church. I didn't even know that I've seen rainbow flags on churches, but I really didn't care. Like who would ever want to go and hang out at a church, Right. And then finally I'm like, oh, rainbow flags on churches. Oh, affirming churches. Oh, MCC. Oh, Troy Perry, who started MCC. I don't know if you all know who Troy Perry is. Maybe look him up. But, so I just started learning about all of these things. And then I learned about gay Christians, the Gay Christian Network, Matthew Vines, the Reformation Project. All of this led to Kathy Boldock, who's the lead in our film. And she's the one who discovered the 1946. It was the 1946 RSV. Then she met a guy called Ed Oxford. He took it the next level, found out that all of the archives were at Yale. And then the two of them have now done this research, and now they're writing a book. And the book is called How the Bible Became Anti-Gay, Forging a Sacred Weapon. So that's pretty much what the movie is about, their research and the book that's going to be out this year.
So I got one more question prior to jumping into the movies. First, I do want to say a statement you made. Your tips for success.
Yes.
A long time ago, you said was believe in yourself, stay positive, and believe you can do it. You're very positive, and you're very self-driven. There's another word, but they always elude me when I need them the most. Then focus on what you want to do. You also did that, and create a body of work. I was going to ask you how you applied these in school, but it just seemed like you just kept going with it. So you walk the talk. Hollywood can be ruthless. The job environment, film, TV, radio, it can have some of the best people you've ever met, and some people you're just like, gosh, I really want to sock you in the face, bro.
Right, so, totally.
Who was a mentor or someone that was, it doesn't have to be a big star, it doesn't have to be somebody great, but who was a mentor that took you under their wing for a little bit or just had a little impact? Mine would be Marcus Goldman at WMMR. I have a lot of mentors there, Pancake, Rabbi, Sarah, etc. But no one did more than to push me into my pursuit than Marcus. No one stuck out their neck for me. No one forced me to get out of myself and go to work. So who was somebody like that? And this one's a personal question for me. Since you worked on Red Dawn, were you able to meet Josh Peck?
Oh yeah, Josh is awesome.
He is. All right, this is gonna sound weird, but as a kid, watching Drake and Josh, he was pretty. I was like, damn, I wish I could just meet him. So we're in DC. My mom and dad are military, and she just came back from Kuwait. So we were in DC at the Capitol building. We got to meet the vice president. God's blessings, man. My parents deserved it. And we were at the Space and Aeronautics Museum, and Josh was there. And I was like, oh, that looked like Josh. Oh, never mind. Somebody walked up. I was like, oh, so I took a picture with him. He hugs just like you think.
Oh yeah, definitely. He's great. He's so good with his fans. He was, like there would be, people would know we would be filming in the neighborhoods. I don't even know how. Like Twitter, who knows what they were doing, but there would be like a corner filled with girls on the corner, and he would go and spend time with them. So there was so I worked in the props department on that movie. Yes. And so at the time I had this awesome green Jeep, like a Jeep Wrangler. And we needed to have a photograph it was a prop that we needed to do. So I actually took him out with the blonde girl, what's her name? Who was his girlfriend at the time, the Australian actress. And we did a photo shoot with my Jeep, and that was like his car then for the movie. And that was one of the photos we used. Anyway, he's cool. We had a lot of fun. But yeah, I work with all of them. Listen, this actors are just like us. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. So I try not to get too starstruck and just do my job and they do their job. Most of the time, everybody's pretty cool. There have been a couple not so cool. I won't name names. That's not what this podcast is about. Maybe we'll do a special behind it. No, I'm just kidding.
Put it on Patreon. Pero mira, I understand. Like I said, you said it, and this is the thing. I was so happy. I still get starstruck. I met some of my idols, and I know they're people too, but it's not until you talk to them you can calm down. But he was taking.
Totally, I do too. I'm just teasing. But go ahead.
But who was the mentor that helped you, that pushed you? Back to the original question.
So I mean, I guess it would be. I'm pretty my self motivator, honestly, because I've been on my own my entire life. And so if I don't pick myself up, no one else is going to. And that's really probably the only reason why I'm alive, because I probably could have killed myself with drugs and alcohol. I had a big problem for a while. And if I didn't see my own value, like nobody was like, hey, get up. Like I got up. But I do have a friend who I mentioned earlier, Jenna Serbu, who is our producer and writer. She's been there all along. She knows, we've been in car accidents together. She knows my parents. Like, she's from Philly. Like, so we're both Philly girls. Yeah, totally. But now that I'm coming into this project and basically taking everything that I've learned from my experience in the industry and putting it into this movie. My mentor is Dan Karslake, who did a movie called For the Bible Tells Me So. And that movie won Sundance several years ago. It was shortlisted for an Oscar. It's been translated in like multiple languages all over the world. I think you can watch it on YouTube now, but it was very instrumental for me growing up because it deals with conservative Christianity and parents and child relationship. So for me, that movie was just like it. And when I started making this movie, our executive producers who gave us the money to start the project told me that they could introduce me to Dan. And I was like, Dan? And sure enough, they did. And I asked Dan to come on this journey with us. And without him, there are so many mistakes that he made that he's going to make sure we don't make. And we're not making them. And, his movie was great. These are more just like on back end mistakes and like just things that, when you want to make the movie, you make decisions sometimes, so we don't want to give up any ownership of this project. We want to make sure that it's handled in a way where we don't have Hollywood tainting the research. The research is very important to us, and the finessing of this material with the conservative Christian audience and how sensitive we are to empathizing with them, as I said earlier, knowing that they're victims of bad theology too. And so making sure that we hit those notes. So anyway, so Dan is making sure I don't make those mistakes.
That's phenomenal. And you say victims of bad theology. For me, it's so difficult as a group because a lot of the stuff in the Bible, people say it's either subjective or it's not subjective. So everyone's at each other's throats over, you're right, you're wrong, etc. But let's hop into this. You've mentioned it many times before.
Yep.
You're at the conference. It was 2018. You're with your dad and mom, and you heard about the letters discovered at Yale that say there may have been a mistranslation in the Bible. And all of a sudden, you stopped everything. You said,
Yep.
You know what? I really want to go for this. This is something that sparked a fire in you. And when you had that happen, what were the first steps you took? Like I had something happen to me, and all of a sudden, like I had a whole year's worth of planning done in my head within 2 to 3 minutes. So when you heard about it, you're like, I have to go into this more. What did you do? And then what sparked the movie? Which is like, no, we have to do a movie on it. I got it. So what was the time frame from that to the movie starting?
Sure. So it was October 2018 when I first learned of the mistranslation. And I was sitting in the conference with my mom and dad, but 2 months prior to that, I was already on an exploration trying to find affirming theology to seek common ground with my parents and other people like me. And so I had already said to my Christian friends at this church that, again, presented themselves as affirming, but they weren't. And my Bible study, I was very open with them. And I'm like, I'm going to make a documentary about this. Had no idea about the mistranslation. So at this point, I'm doing research, right? And I had then learned about Kathy Boldock. And the same day Kathy Boldock was coming into Los Angeles to speak, my parents were in town. So I'm like, well, I'm going to film it. I had no idea about the RSV mistranslation, though. And so since my parents used to make me go to Loved One Out, I was like, hey, mom and dad, will you come to this conference? And I got permission from the church, from Kathy. I paid for 2 people for the day, and we went to this conference and I filmed it. Mm-hmm. That's when I learned about the mistranslation. That's when I learned about the 1946. So I'm sitting in this conference, we're already filming. I'm sitting next to my mom and dad, and I'm just like, this is incredible. So I, at that moment, knew I needed to get this research out immediately because of how Dan's film had played such a role in my life. And I know the power of film, and I know the power of media. I know my own experience. I know who I am. And now we have the evidence. I have to tell the story. So that was my experience while I'm sitting in this conference. Meanwhile, my dad was sitting next to me having a completely different experience, as you can imagine. And so he got up and he basically was asking questions, and that whole piece is in the movie where he comes up and he's like, can you show one example of a positive relation, of a man and man positive example of same-sex relations in the Bible? And then they get into it for like 10 minutes and then boom. So from there, what I did was, so I had permission to film that day, but I didn't know that I'd be following Kathy and Ed's journey. I just thought that might just be if my parents were in town. I was really filming because my parents were in town. I'm taking them to the conference. So, so after I learned about the work Kathy and Ed were doing, I contacted Kathy and I asked her if I could document them. And she said no. I begged for about, a couple of weeks. And finally, the only reason why she said yes is because they had a documentary team back out. And then she said, you can come. And I was like, okay, great. And then I've been here ever since. So it was a little bit of luck.
You know what? Again, I'm not one that likes to say every chance meeting is God. I've had a lot of times where coincidence happened and I was like, you know what? This is not God telling me something, but I'm gonna go for it.
Yeah.
But then there's other times it's just perfect timing, right place. And sometimes you got to give credits like, you know what? So
I agree totally. And I feel that way, like there are too many coincidences for it can't not be God.
With that said, the biggest thing I feel like your team, you are going to deal with, and I think Pastor Pine may have reached on this at his recount. First off, he needed to.
You are paying attention.
But
I love it.
They say mistranslation. There could be arguments all around, well, it wasn't a mistranslation, that's what Paul wanted to do, or it wasn't a mistranslation, that's how it's made into English, or this is the only viable thing. I have a list here in my hand of possible other words Paul could have used, but the thing that keeps on getting lost is he was very smart. Okay, he was taught by, I think it was Gamaliel. Oh, every time I need it, it's always lost. Basically, one of the top Hebrew teachers of the time, respected around the world. He was taught by him. He was on the same par as Philo. I may be saying the name wrong, but Paul knew what he was doing, and it's our issue trying to translate it. So when somebody goes to you, this is a mistranslation. No, it's not. That's how it's supposed to be. How do you deal with that? And then I'll go into my own findings real quick after that. We can.
Well, luckily I'm able to say it's going to all be in the movie. So, we'll deal with it in the movie. But okay, I'm glad you listened to the Pastor Pines thing. I just put another link in our bio to 2 podcasts. One that Pines did in rebuttal to the video that he took down where he plain out lied about some things, but whatever. Okay. And the second one is Ed Oxford's talk. And he is the lead theologian in our film. So they both do this work on arsenokoitai, and they both look at 1 Corinthians 6:9. And so there are 2 very different approaches to it. And Ed's will explain everything in the movie. So basically I definitely encourage you to watch both of those. And I'm going to do a TikTok on it later to get people to listen to both of those podcasts. So what we see is the words and language changes over time. So in order to understand what was really going on, we have to look at the words throughout history and how they were used and how they've changed. And that includes commentaries, that includes lexicons. And so what we see is over the last 60 years, Bibles, dictionaries, lexicons, commentary, all saying that arsenokoitai means homosexual. But if you look at commentaries and lexicons from the 1500s to the 1800s, that is not what they say. And that is not what it says for the Malakoi either. Malakoi means soft, to be a coward, to be, effeminate can be one, but what does effeminate mean? It's basically someone who's not fitting in with their social roles. And so we look at a commentary from the 1500s that gives us the definition of arsena coiti. And so we've fallen into this ideology that is relatively new and can be completely traced. But I don't know, ask me the question again, because I got lost in a minute there there's so many details with the pastor pines and the links that y'all need to check out.
Like you said, and you've touched on it many times in other interviews, but you know, like when somebody just says like, oh, it wasn't a mistranslation, why would you categorize it a mistranslation? You know, like I said, I got a list of words here. It has been a long time since I've dived deep into the Bible and was able to pinpoint different verses. But this is the thing I found most interesting. So I subscribe to the New King James Version. That's my favorite version. But the one I go to if I need the closest definition is the Oxford Study Bible. And it prides itself on being one of the most accurate translations. The differences within the text and then the point. So in First Corinthians 6:9, if any pastors I got that wrong, just my bad, we'll get it right. Paul's addressing the Church of Corinth. He's giving a list of vices. You guys were sinners doing this, but now, you know, you're great in Christ. So in the New King James, it does say homosexual, but for
it should in the, well, not in the 1611 New King James, because it should say abusers of themselves with mankind.
See, that's why I need you, because my translation says that, but you're helping now, because the one for the Oxford Study Bible says sexual pervert. That changes it radically.
Okay, so there's enough evidence, and like you said, Paul could have used any one of a dozen words if he wanted to talk about homosexuals, because there were words at the time to talk about consensual acts between men. That's not what Paul did. Paul, we think, coined a word. And then where did these words come from? From the Levitical passages, right? So arson and coiti together, this is all theory. But if that were the case, then people are like, well, then see, it's man shall not lie with man as it does with a woman. They're meaning that this is about homosexuality, but that's not the case. And actually, Dr. Robert Gagnon makes a good point in his book, Who's Not Affirming, who points out that the arsena coiti is a form of adultery. And if you look at the Levitical passages, they're prohibitions against patriarchs to only have sex with their wife and not have sex with anybody else, including their mother-in-laws, because that's dishonoring your father, who's also a patriarch. And the last thing you want to do is offend another patriarch, which is why two men of equal status don't have sex with each other. But it was totally acceptable for a man of a higher status to have sex with a boy, with a subservient, with a slave, concubine. And so all of these things were going on, and the Levitical priests during the time were like, hey, no, actually, it's not okay to have sex with all these people. It's about adultery. And so, within all of these findings, and so we'll be able to show that not only through Robert Gagnon's work and some other, ideas around this arsena coiti idea of it being not only just abuse and some of these other things that we'll see and can show through lexicons and dictionaries, but it has to do with breaking a covenant. It's not, that there's all these prohibitions around it that goes way beyond just man on man sex. Mm-hmm. And adultery is one of them. And so we'll show how that can be. And you said Paul is very smart. So of course he pulled those from those passages, but those passages are not talking about homosexuality. So the film will look at all of the clobber passages. We're going to look at historical context around all of the passages. And my argument is even if it's not black and white, first of all, there's so much evidence to suggest that there's questions, lots of questions, right? And then we can also see when there was a split into translation, most European languages translate the Levitical passages, man shall not lie with boy. As and so the word zakar comes into play. Again, questions. But when you start stacking the evidence, there's more evidence to suggest that it has everything to do with all of these other kinds of prohibitions and not a sexual orientation or homosexuality. And when you say these verses are about homosexuality, we are actually distracting from the real abuse and the real abusers in our society, which is rape culture, the priest scandal with little boys. Like, why aren't there any verses that talk about pedophilia? Why would the church want to cover that up? Why is it homosexuals the scapegoat? So there's these questions, and so there's so much evidence to suggest the other, and we're not being honest. The Me Too movement is another one. We're not being honest with these texts, and homosexuals are the scapegoat of them. And so again, we're going to show enough in the film for that movable middle to be like, this makes complete sense. And why would the church want to cover it up? So, and I think you're right. Paul is smart. He knew exactly what he was doing. He used arsenic for a reason. Does not mean homosexual.
And for our listeners, our viewers, I want to make it a big point. Take a breath if you're freaking out at that statement. All right. And I want you to do the research.
Yeah, just do work.
You may not, but do the research, because she's saying things I agree with and she's saying things I don't agree with. I've said a lot of things she does not agree with. But the point is, we're having a discussion. I really want to drive that home, not just for your live viewers, but for everyone to watch this after. So, like you said, you have this revelation. You're already doing the team. You're already building the film. You got a couple really impressive names on this project: Mary Lambert, Jason Eichler, I believe, Daniel Karslak, Jun Young, Jenna Serbu.
Yeah.
How did they all fall into place? Did you reach out to them from prior connects? Were they already on the film project prior to you finding the research? How did everyone come together so you can make this pretty phenomenal team? I'm not gonna lie, Dr. Young, Dr. Young got movement. I'll be like,
yeah,
Dr. Young,
he does. Yeah. So Jenna is one of my best friends. She's a writer producer, and I pretty much begged her because I need help. And so, and she said yes, of course. And so she's been with us since the beginning. And then when we first met our donors, they supported Dan Karslake's second movie called For They Know Not What They Do. And you can watch For They Know Not What They Do on fortheyknow.org. You can rent it, and it's the follow-up of For the Bible Tells Me So. So they were very impressed with this type of work. They wanted to support me. They sent Dan to me to vet me pretty much. And I turned it into, hey, will you mentor me? So that's how Dan got involved. He didn't think about it. And then the executive producers all agreed. Dan, their names are Todd and Teresa, and they paid Dan's salary basically for us, which is incredible. And then Jason. So Jason runs the original content division for Hearst Media, which is one of the largest media conglomerates in the world. And so he is a big dog at this company. And one day we got an email from him, and all roads lead to Kathy. So Jason is a gay guy who grew up in the church and, has been a victim of this whole, what I call bad theology that has oppressed the LGBTQ community. And so his brother was doing the work. His brother was doing research, trying to figure this out as a straight cis man, and learned of Kathy Boldock, and through that learned of the documentary and was like, hey, Jason, I think you should look at this. So when he emailed us, we were like, Hearst Media emailed him immediately. So he told us that he could get us Mary Lambert. He is friends with Mary and did some work with Mary. So that's how we got Mary involved. And Mary, one day we got on a call. And so she's our music composer and our music supervisor. So we're super excited to have her. I have a meeting with her next week.
Superstar.
Yeah, totally. And then Jun Young is a gay Christian who I met through a pastor called Reverend Ken Fong. And Ken Fong was going to be in our documentary. We did interview him. He's on some of our TikTok videos. He became an affirming pastor. He was not affirming at first. And he's been a guest speaker at the Reformation Project. So he introduced me to Jun as a potential investor or donor, because we need obviously a lot of finances to make this movie. And Jun has access to donors. And so we ended up working out a deal where he's now partnering with us, and he built our website. They've built beautiful presentations for us and things like that. So that's how Jun is involved. And Jun Young started a company called Beloved Arise, which is and celebrates queer youth of faith. It's an organization for queer youth of faith to meet and connect either virtually or in their personal towns. So kids aren't feeling isolated and alone if they've grown up in a situation like me. Yeah,
And I just want to point out that's very big, because when I was at school, we had someone came out as transsexual. We did a whole event, and I'll never forget this story. One of the girls, she came out at that moment, said, "Hey, I'm gay Christian, but this is why this is important." And she told us a story about how she went to camp, and one of her students, one of the kids she was watching as a counselor, she was gay. She was dealing with the turmoil of being gay and Christian, and was being abused by her father.
Oh,
And
wow.
she had no idea what to do for, I might be, I'm gonna say I'm paraphrasing, but it was over a year. She's just caught in this mix. And because she went to that camp and found someone like her, she was able to try and get steady ground and was able to push past all of it.
Thank you. And that's why I really support Jun's organization. And I'm glad that he supports the 1946 movement. And it is a movement. This is more than a movie. Like when the movie's out, the work's not done. We have a ton of work to do. Like I said, this has been ingrained in people's minds, and the homosexuals are not the bad guys. And we're completely missing the point, and we've been missing the mark for years. And so I hope, like you said, if you don't agree with us, and thank you for being honest, you don't have to agree with everything we say, but at least do the work. And then we can have honest conversations and we can talk about things. And then, maybe next conversation, you can tell me what you don't agree on, or maybe you've looked it up and be like, hey, I didn't agree on this, but I looked it up. Let's talk about this. And then we're getting somewhere. But we don't get anywhere when we're like the Pastor Pines of the world, who just immediately hit pause and react and think that they have all the answers. They're not listening to us. He's not listening to us. And they're causing more damage in the world. And I have no problem saving the receipts and putting it on blast. I'm not trying to do it to be an asshole, because I'm not. I really am just tired. And censorship and lying is not Christian. And if you're really that firm in your argument, you shouldn't have to censor us, and you shouldn't have to lie. And so all of this stuff is going to come out. Like, we don't even have to do anything. It's just they're laying it out in front of us. We're for the world to see. So it's just really interesting to me. It's going to continue to be interesting.
What is the most amazing moment during the film production of the movie, and what was the hardest bullet to bite during the production of the movie? Whether or not it was you prayed to God and it's like, hey, could you make this work? Miracle happened. Or, somebody's like changed their thinking, versus like, oh my gosh, we're broken. There's no way to pay for this. And it just keeps coming down. What were the two ends of the spectrum? Greatest moment producing, absolute worst.
Well, okay. So the best moment are the people, because I met so many amazing people along this journey, and people who've already been doing the work, people who are teaching me, and then through the people and through all of the work, all of the things that we're learning together, and how our community is growing, and we're all being able to affirm that we're not crazy, we're not the bad guys. And so it's just interesting and fascinating to see the community grow, my community grow as just my personal friends, and all y'all on the TikTok know what I'm talking about. And then just see this research grow. Even today, I was on the phone with Ed Oxford, who's our lead researcher, because I have a team at his house right now filming some stuff. And he's like, oh, I was looking into this and I was reading into this. And like one of the reasons why their book isn't done yet, because they're going down so many deep dive rabbit holes, because they care so much about this work, and you can just go on forever. So now they are really focusing, but the research is just so fascinating, and it just keeps getting better. So that's the best part. The worst part would be, it's been, as much as this is really odd, but as much as I've been meeting a whole bunch of people and have now built this amazing community, it's still a very lonely endeavor. And without money, I am stuck doing everything myself. And so it's very long hours. It's very things I don't know that I have to learn. Things like running so many different things in a day just has been very challenging. And one of the biggest challenges in that is the data management, file management, data management, making sure you don't lose all the footage. That's been the most stressful. And then dealing with the hard drives. And so I've had to learn and I've learned a lot on it. And now I know, but it doesn't help with anxiety. Let's put it that way.
And you said you had to downsize. You maxed out all your credit cards. You had to change your life radically. what was the biggest, like, I gotta let all this go to pursue this? Because I get it,
In
you know.
2018, I was just about to be debt free. I had a great job. So 2018, we did Jay-Z and Beyonce's Oscar party. I mean, like, thank you, right? I mean, so I was working with big clients on big things, making great money, and I was about to be completely debt free and then start saving. And then I heard this research and I was like, well, I guess I'm not getting out of debt. And as a filmmaker, you never invest in something unless like you're super wealthy, but even then you get other people to pay for it because it's such a high risk investment. And then especially documentary film and an impact film, like you're not going to make any money off of it. And so this isn't about making money. This is about, I have to tell this research. So I am the first, I maxed out all my credit cards because so basically David's 80 years old. I don't know how long he's going to be alive. Thank God we have his story. And he's so, oh my God. Oh, I can't wait for y'all to hear his story. So I had to start buying cameras and buying gear. And then we had to go to the conferences. So I had to pay for people's flights. I couldn't pay for people to go, but I found 4 volunteers. So that's 4 flights, the car rental. We had to rent a TV. We built a trailer, had to feed everybody. And before you know it, so in the last 2 years, I'm $40,000 personally invested in this movie. So, but it'll come back, I'm slowly getting now back out of debt. But it's worth it. It's worth all of it. If I can save one kid's life, I can make one life better, then it's worth it all.
That's phenomenal. So with all that, the film is almost done. It's post-production. How do you go about getting it to the festivals now that it's almost there? Just need to clean it up, get the lawyers on it, make sure everything's accounted for, and make sure that everything's layered correctly to be released. And I know you guys were trying to get Lady Gaga to support the film.
Yeah.
What connections do you have that possibly could help with that? And what other LGBT supporters / celebrities you had in mind? Like me, I already mentioned Rob Halford, so that's my go-to every time because I'm a big heavy metal kid. He
I love it.
One time at me and I was like, hey, I'm validated in metal. So,
Yeah, I didn't even know about that guy. But so besides Hearst Media, we've got this guy called John who works for NBC and E Entertainment, and he does all of the celebrity bookings. So he actually is going to make a personal introduction to Gaga's people. So it'll be like 1 degree away, and then that person will decide whether or not it's something to share with Lady Gaga. So that email is out. That's probably the closest that we're going to get. And it's coming from a family member, like not just like a booking agent. So they will look at it. And then it's going to be up to that one person. So hopefully I hear something. That email went out last week. So from there, this person called John, I am going to send a list of other celebrities. So if anybody has any ideas, please send me a DM. And if you can give me that heavy metal guy's name, because I don't know who it is.
Rob Halford. Oh, I almost got the book.
So we definitely, and so the goal would be for, because we have a fiscal sponsor, donations are tax write-offs. So if somebody wanted to support this film and they were wealthy, they would be a no-brainer. And then that would just help us reach our goal. And because we do want to finish to submit this year, and we do need more money to get there. So we've got 2.5 months for a deadline. Still need to raise some money, but we're getting there. The movie's looking great. So we're just gonna, like I keep saying, one scene at a time, one shoot at a time. We're filming today. We're filming a lot next week. So we are still filming too. And it's mostly pickups, experts, and then just some filling in stuff that we know is missing as we're building the structure.
Okay. Mira, I know I gotta let you go soon, but I really wanted to hit this home. I always ask this, is my favorite question to ask everyone. What is the most important piece of advice someone has given you that readily comes to mind? I've gotten a lot of stupid answers. I've gotten some life-altering answers. But for you, when you think about all the wisdom you've accumulated, all the lessons from church and these people that are wise, people that, might have been atheists or, living their lives in debauchery or pure sincerity, what was the best piece of advice someone's given you to say, you know what, I'm gonna hold on to that and latch on?
Well, I think the best piece of advice would be to take a moment and not react. Being reactive is dangerous on so many different levels, and you can't, once you say something, you can't take it back. And so I've had to learn that the hard way in my life, and I can be very reactive. And so I think that for all of us, if we all just take a step back, listen to what's going on before we respond, we'll be able to have a better response. So
Phenomenal. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to point out that do not sleep on the atrocities that have happened to your brothers and sisters. Okay? A lot's happening in the US right now. We just had the slavery thing we're still doing with the homosexuals being scrutinied against, screwed over. I want to remind everybody that there was a time where people, just for their belief, were brutally murdered, killed. There are people still killing themselves, and there's a severe lack of empathy. That's why I did this interview, because I've been fortunate enough to be on almost every spectrum. I might not subscribe to it fully, but I've been impacted by almost everything you can think of. And an interview like this is important to, again, like she said, listen and empathize. You don't have to like somebody, but don't disassociate the suffering that's happened before to your brothers and sisters. We're all one world, one race. So, Rocky, thank you so much. 1946, the movie, coming out soon. Guys, biggest thing is they have this 1946 hoodie. It's a white hoodie. She's wearing the shirt right now. Mina, what other plugs can we do? I know you got the GoFundMe, you got the website. What other places can people go to find the message of 1946?
sure, I would say go to TikTok and Instagram at 1946 the movie. We're also on Twitter and Facebook, same handle, but you'll get a lot of action on TikTok. And then there's a link in all of those bios to a link tree that gives you not only access to our GoFundMe or our fiscal sponsor where you can donate, but we've put links in there too to talks that'll help you along the way, whether it's at Oxford and his talk on First Corinthians, or Kathy Boldock's talk on unclobbering the mess, and some other ones. So resources, and we will make more resources available for y'all.
Awesome, phenomenal. Mademoiselle, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I enjoyed doing
Yes.
the research. It's been so long since I really got to dive into
You're great. You're so good. Like, you are definitely researched. I really appreciate all of the effort you put into this interview. So thank you. It's noted.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Well, guys, check out 1946, the movie. As always, I'm John the Ninja. Be smart, be mindful, and God bless. And remember your brothers and sisters, guys and girls, stumbling, because I'm so excited. Either way, Ninja out.